Okay, folks, well, welcome to Webinar Wednesday. And today's topic is going to be on artificial intelligence and the future of cloud communications. For those that don't know me, my name is Reza Kamran. I am the Senior Director of Product Marketing. My areas of expertise are really on the unified communication side. And this should be an interesting topic. So before we get started, I wanted to just go through essentially some basic housekeeping items on how this tool works. So what you'll see on your screen is a few key areas. One is an emoji option that really tells us how you're feeling during this webinar, happy, sad, laughing. You'll also see another icon here for sending questions and Q&A features. Now, the third option is clicking on the phone button. So you may be defaulted to the microphone on your computer, but if there's ever a problem with the connection, you can switch to phone and be able to dial in to improve any audio settings and capabilities. So look, I'll tell you now. This has been a very challenging topic, taking on very technical concepts and ideas in this presentation, and trying to dumb down a little bit of AI and what this really means from a business perspective. So, any emojis you can send my way throughout this presentation that tells me, "Hey, we get it, we understand it. You don't know what you're talking about." I'm all ears right now. So. Appreciate any feedback, and thanks. I see some of the emojis flying across the screen. Appreciate folks listening in, and hopefully everybody can hear me clearly. Can I get a thumbs up if you guys can hear me okay? Yep. Okay. Perfect. Seems to be coming through. Excellent. All right. So let's move on. So for the agenda that we're going to talk through, I want to talk through some specific concepts and ideas. First, let's make sure that we're all on the same page and understanding, what AI is, and I really want to keep this simple. The next step is really let's make sure we understand what AI means from the communication space. So obviously, from a partner perspective, the communication side is what we're selling, and how do we really apply this today, and really what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. We'll go through some sample applications as well that Intermedia is developing. And then at the end, just a quick summary and questions and answers. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if there are specific questions that are coming up during the course of the presentation, feel free to add them into the Q&A, and we'll have a review of that at the end of the call. Other thing that I want to point out before we get started is, look, this is not a one-and-done presentation for AI, right? It's a constant evolution process. So as we improve our understanding and our development activities in AI, the intention is really to educate and continue to educate our partners on how we've improved. So the snapshot that we see today, may not necessarily be the snapshot that we see tomorrow. It'll be an enhanced version of that. I mean, that's the benefits of stepping into these particular areas. So look, at the end of the day, there's a bright future for technology advancements in this particular area. And there's some pretty amazing things that are happening on the technology side that are impacting various industries. Our intention behind this presentation is to look at the impacts of these technologies from the communication side. But before we go through that, I think it's very important that we understand some very basic concepts of, what artificial intelligence is. And so look, artificial intelligence loosely is really defined as the concept of creating human-like intelligence that can learn, plan, and process natural language. And there are three broad categories that artificial intelligence is defined as, right? So there's weak or narrow AI. And this is really what I would call more of machine intelligence that is limited to a specific narrow area, right? So it has some human cognitive capabilities to benefit, different various businesses by automating more time-consuming tasks, analyzing data, and mundane tasks that that are not necessarily areas that we would call high performance areas, but something that others just don't want to do. And is there a way that we can automate it so we can interpret the data more effectively? right? So that's the first area that we're seeing right now. And again, it has a very narrow focus, right? It's a very specific task. The next phase is moving into this whole general AI field, which is called artificial general intelligence, AGI, and this is starting to move into more, what I would call tasks, intelligent tasks that humans can do. So there's a concept known as natural language processing, where you're able to see more natural languages that are being used in speech, and the interpretations of that language. So I don't know if folks have ever seen the movie Her. It came out in 2013, I believe. And this movie is about, understanding the dynamics of working with an individual and having the language sound much more natural. More importantly, it's not just understanding and how to speak and translate that data, it's understanding intent and the meaningful intent. So Google, IBM, Watson, there's a number of organizations that are experimenting in this area. And then the last area is this whole strong AI side, which is what I would call this whole artificial superintelligence, right? This is basically where surpassing human intelligence in all aspects of creativity, general wisdom, problem solving, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of these last elements have not really been created yet, but it is part of the overall broad strategy. Now, look, one thing that I'll point out, sorry, before we go to the side, one thing that I also want to point out here is there is a big difference, not a big difference, but there is a difference between AI and machine learning. So you'll hear these things used interchangeably between the presentation, and I wanted to basically clarify what this is. So when we look at artificial intelligence, it's a bigger concept that really looks at intelligent machines that can simulate human thinking, right? Machine learning is really an application or a subset of AI, right? That allows machines to learn from the data that is being programmed explicitly. So that could be historically or predictively, right? The AI side doesn't necessarily require any pre-programming. It's based on algorithms that really work on their own intelligence and evolve, right? So these two things work hand in hand, but they are slightly different in the approach. So I just wanted to make sure that there was an understanding there. Now, when we look at these concepts, and we mentioned briefly about strong AI, this is where the fear of AI comes into place, right? So is in this ASI phase. So, the left side, you'll see typical things that we've seen in science fiction, robots are going to take over the world, and cybernet's going to destroy us all, or it's going to be nuclear war and all sorts of crazy things. So folks like Elon Musk believe that improving or getting to this ASI phase will mean the extinction of the human race. There's another side of it, which is by the likes of some pretty famous inventors like Ray Kurzweil, who's an American inventor, and he's a futurist and a pioneer on many of the AI fronts, who showcases, his studies are really showcasing how humanity's ability to merge with technology it creates to build a better outcome. And the concepts are really built around on the right side are coexisting with AI, with machines to reinforce human ability. So he's got some pretty crazy concepts, but it's, some of the things that he's talked about is our ability to interface with the neocortex, right? So for those that are not familiar with neocortex, it involves the higher brain functions like sensory perception, motor functions, reasoning, consciousness, and thought. And the ability of us to be able to do this not only to connect with cloud, but with other people's neocortexes. So this whole hybrid of connectivity within humankind to essentially enhance an overall human experience. I mean, it's some pretty wild, crazy stuff. We're pretty far off from all this stuff, but I just wanted everybody to sort of understand these pretty interesting concepts that are being developed. So look, let's get down to it. What does AI mean from a communications perspective? And I think at the end of the day, when we're looking at AI and what this means from a communications perspective, I want to sort of paint the picture of the growth area of technologies that exist. So, when we think of these three areas, and again, we've already defined artificial intelligence, but when we look at other concepts like big data and IoT, what does this really mean? So when we talk about big data really is really looking at big data sets that are too large and too complex to deal from traditional application softwares, right? And typically this involves some aspect of predictive analysis, some user analytics that are applied to a huge volume of data. So three concepts that are really built around big data is volume, right? The ability to organize collective data, velocity. So do I have the data streams coming from different devices, and can I monitor and measure them at different speeds because they're coming in at different times? And then variety. How do I manage these different forms of data, right? Whether it be structured data, numerical data, or unstructured data like texts or emails or videos or stock tickers, whatever that may be. There's just tons of information that are there. And then the IoT side of it says, look, in broad terms, what we mean by IoT stands for, the Internet of Things, which, broadly means that any device that basically talks to each other. So that could be, simple sensors or smartphones or RFID tags or home devices, all sorts of stuff, basically, where data is being gathered from, right? And, the objective that I'll tell you right now is that in order to make artificial intelligence more effective, you really need to have the big data aspect of it and the various sets of devices that are out there where the data is coming from. And from a communications perspective, where we see the evolution really happening to get to the AI level is going to be focusing around this whole productivity, employee productivity space, or customer experience. And so the message that you need to get away from this slide is these technologies are really not mutually exclusive. They all sort of interlock and intertwine with each other in order to become effective in our ability to take them and apply applications to artificial intelligence through various examples. So, and we'll cover through examples in a little bit. So look, I wanted to do a quick survey here. I thought it'd be a great opportunity for us to talk about this and really wanted to understand from you guys, how many of your existing customers have implemented some sort of AI or big data into their businesses today? So I'm going to put up a polling question, and then I'd like to maybe spend a couple minutes to kind of review this with you guys. And I have some predictions. I haven't used any AI for these predictions, but I have some predictions of how this is going to go, and want to get some impact, some input from you. So let me just bring up this polling question here and fill it out, and then we can review the results. So let me give you guys a minute to do that. So it should be seeing it now. Give it another 10 or 15 seconds. Okay, looks like it's coming. Okay, so let me share these results with you. Can you guys see the results? Can I get a thumbs up if you can see the results? Okay, perfect. So look, I'm not surprised by it. The highest number that we're seeing here is that more than 72% either are saying under 25% or 23% are saying, I have no idea. And it's not necessarily unheard of right now. That is kind of what I was expecting based on where it is. And look, what I will tell you right now is this kind of comes into the next phase as where are we seeing the growth trajectory from an AI perspective. And I can tell you right now that from an industry perspective today, less than 3% of firms have really deployed any type of AI into some sort of integrated workflow. Is that going to change? Absolutely. It's going to start to improve. And where we're seeing some of the adoption right now, I've certainly been in larger organizations with 500 plus employees, but smaller firms are also starting to develop it. They're just different reasonings behind it. So from a larger firm perspective, typically they have better data and structured employees, and they have fixed cost investments. But smaller firms that are also developing in it or looking at it are looking for other issues, right? Can I now reduce dependency on IT systems, or can I lower my organizations? They have lower levels of organizational resistance to change. They have tools or basic tools that they want to automate right now. There's various reasons for it. So the two sectors that we're seeing, leading activities happening right now are really focusing on the financial services sector and high tech and communications. I'm going to talk through communication examples a little later on, but from the overall financial services side, there's various areas that they're looking at. So we've seen things like AI and credit decisions, assessments of credit scores, automating this into areas to show, where lenders can differentiate between different sets of users, right? AI and fraud protection, AI has been successful in balancing fraud, credit card fraud, and being able to predict some of those assumptions that are happening. Also, seen banks to be able to prevent money laundering or helping them cut costs and investigations ahead of schedule based on profiles and stuff like that. AI in trading is another area for financial services, right? Time is money. And they're trying to basically figure out ways of taking structured databases like spreadsheets or social media and news and put them into stock performing activities, right? To be able to create some algorithms that really make sense. So there's lots of really cool things that are happening right now that they're leading on. But again, the spirit of it is that the market isn't ready. So the question is really what's happening from the communication perspective and why is this a challenge right now? So from a UCaaS and a contact center perspective, there's several areas that are being looked at. Now, from the UCaaS side, what I'll tell you right now, everything from transcriptions and call recordings to having these personal assistants, to having predictive intelligence of data and documentation for file sharing, to having automatic participant identifications or some sort of automated user profiles and permissions that are created are some of the basic areas that are being looked at. The point of it is looking at this in improving the employee engagement. So how do I improve overall employee engagement? So an example of that, for voice assistants, can I now use a voice assistant to help a salesperson as they're going through the sales cycle? So say, for example, my chatbot or a voice assistant is interacting with a customer for, that initial screening of activity and is able to basically interface with them, provide them with the right data 24/7, and then be able to set up scheduling calls, with the salesperson when an opportunity becomes real based on some of the machine learning aspects of historical data and potentially some predicting. Contact centers are really focusing on what I would call more customer-centric stuff, right? So this is all about conversational AI and natural speech languages for chatbots or, sentiment analysis, right? Or intelligent routing. And look, I'll give you an example of this, and then we could talk about the challenges. But this is more on the machine learning side, but I thought this was always an interesting example to look at. So, I was pre-pandemic, I was traveling, I think it was American Airlines, and that I was traveling by. This was about 2 a.m, and I think it was about a 5 o'clock flight. And I didn't realize, I forgot to check in my baggage. And I was like, oh my God, I do not want to have to deal with this at 5 a.m. And I said, I'm going to get on the call. I'm going to see if I can just, it was 24-hour service, see if I can register my bag in advance, right? Called the call center, and just dreading it, because you're like, I don't want to be on hold for hours. It's like after hours. Interface with, I guess I would call it a natural language processing system, but getting close, where called in, automatically was authenticated, interfacing with their bot, saying, "Hi, welcome, welcome back, Reza. Thanks for coming back and being this person." Blah blah. Blah. I'm like, yeah. So, I see that you've called in before, and we're just looking through your records and stuff like that. We're just curious. Are you calling in to check a bag by any chance? Because we've seen that at the last 6 trips you've checked a bag. I'm like, yeah, I am actually calling in to do that. Would you like us to check one for you now? Yes. Okay. This is normally the size of the bags you have. Is this the bag you're checking? Absolutely. Okay. Price is there. We've got your credit card file on detail. You're done. This process took 5 minutes. I mean, it was unbelievable and such a huge opportunity for me to be so pleased, especially at 2 o'clock in the morning. But look, the reality of that situation is that it's developing. And so what you're going to see in the contact center side are things like that in terms of automation for some of those basic capabilities. Now, where we're seeing challenges, though, in terms of the adoption is limitations. So there are limitations right now on machine learning. So what I will tell you right now is machine learning falls into various subsets of what they would call training data. This is various sets of different types of data that are used to make the machine learning capabilities more intelligent. Supervised learning, unsupervised learning. They're called something called reinforcement learning. I'm not going to go through the details of what those are, but at the end of the day, this training data really comes from data scientists. And most of these skill sets right now of data scientists are limited to probably about 10,000 people in the world. And those 10,000 people, about 95% of them are probably working for Google or Amazon, right? So the challenge with it is the availability of these resources are not there in order to get to the data that we need in order to create the algorithms that are necessary. Privacy and security is another big issue. Data scientists typically like to think of data as centralized. But from a security perspective, is it meeting all of the requirements, regulatory standard, GDPR, HIPAA compliancy? There's a bunch of stuff that's being looked at, and centralizing data doesn't necessarily bode well from a security perspective, right? So you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. At this point, there's no replacement for voice. So human interaction is still a critical aspect right now. I mean, we're not at that point right now where you can say, replace my 911 services with a virtual assistant. I wouldn't be comfortable with it right now. I mean, there are things that are in development, like artificial empathy, which they're calling artificial intelligence, coding empathy into machines. But again, it's just not there yet right now. Business adoption and leadership buy-in. At the end of the day, there's still not a lot of comfort related to invoking AI technologies into critical business functions, departments, and processes. I mean, it's a combination of comfort level. It could be a way of life. People just are not comfortable implementing this at a leadership level, right? And it could be a generation thing that may change over time. But at this point, it's just not there. And then misconceptions, right? People have this assumption that AI is going to solve all their problems. And the technology just isn't there yet. We have weak AI that we talked about, which is going to solve some, mundane stuff or reoccurring stuff. It's getting there. But, just because you've implemented AI doesn't mean that you're going to be a billionaire right after that, right? And I think that's the misconceptions, is that it's not going to solve world hunger or the world problems. It's basically the same thing happened when the internet came out, or when in the 2000s when we had e-commerce being the be all end all. People said, oh, as soon as I have an e-commerce site, I'm going to make $1 billion. No, that's not the case. The point is that AI is an opportunity to take something from good to great, and I'll explain what that means later on. But this just kind of gives you an idea of the overall solutions that we've been looking at. So look, what is Intermedia doing? So from an intermediate perspective, I'm just showcasing this investment of hierarchy. So what you're seeing right here in this hierarchy is a pyramid, basically, that talks about how data moves to get to a point where we can actually leverage and apply this. So we're at this point right now where data is already being collected, data is already being moved, and we're at this stage right now of transforming and exploring the data, which means basically looking at relevant customer data, picking out the interesting areas of that data, filtering it, cleaning it, and then compiling this data into a usable format. And the areas of impact really are on the right here in terms of user activity, device information, fraud and security, billing activity, analytics and reporting. And we're constantly growing and extending this into other areas. But the point of this is this build activity, which I would define as more the IoT stage, is important. You can't apply it to AI unless you have relevant data to use it. The above item says, once I have the relevant data, now I can start applying this. And from our perspective, this is looking at, weak AI and general AI and ML applications in areas like security, communications, and analytics. So I think it's important just to understand some of those dynamics. So let's talk about examples, right? From a security and AI perspective, what are we doing right now that's relevant? So these two examples can mutually live independent of each other, but I think the important of it here is to understand the spirit of what we're talking about here. So in both of these cases right now, whether it be communication and fraud detection or suspicious login detection, this is really what I would call anomaly detectors, right? So it's analyzing past behavior to see if a current behavior falls into a pattern of some sort. So if we look at this for an example, like adaptive behavior, let's look at something as an example. Say on the 4th of July, calls typically drop to zero, right? And what ends up happening is understanding that past behavior, it becomes part of the baseline for your model. So it becomes a learned behavior. And so the result of that is that, okay, someone decides to make a call on the 4th of July. Okay, it's unusual, but not there. But if somebody making a absorbent amount of unusual calls from a location or a login that isn't common, Okay, that's a problem right now. And that raises a red flag. So some of the weak AI stuff that we talk about here is really taking a lot of those basic reports, knowledge, infrastructure, and data points right now and bringing it into useful information that is relevant right now, that will be used by, in this particular case for Intermedia, a human in order to then, figure out how to basically interpret the data and then figure out how to solve it moving forward. So it's really a combination of leveraging some of the predictive modeling with human interaction. Now, will that change? Possibly, as we move into general AI and the scenarios start to increase, there will be more and more tasks that can be managed and solved without necessarily human interaction. I don't think we're necessarily there yet, but these are just some examples of how you can understand it. So some other areas right now from an applications perspective, they're sort of already in market. We have meeting insights, right? So the meeting insights basically allows you that when you record a meeting, that it essentially has the ability to transcribe your meeting activities, right? And lets you understand it and brings out results. So in other words, you can actually start to leverage, typing out, instead of typing out the meeting summaries, it automatically types out meeting summaries for you and sends it out to the team. Is it perfect? No. There are certainly mistakes and it's improving over time. But the point is, it's going to get better over time. So the abilities of having that, or the ability to share through one-click sharing type of opportunities, right? Our partner dashboard in QoS. So those that are using this right now, you know that it has some aspects of active monitoring, things like downtime detection. And where we're trying to take this is, look, if I'm monitoring a specific customer, right? And right now today, I can do some active monitoring. Can I now in the future do predictive modeling? So what does predictive modeling mean? That means, okay, I've got the patterns and understanding some of the data right now, but you know what? Customer X, though this activity hasn't happened, we can look at some of the data right now, and I can guarantee you in 4 months, if they don't do something, they're in serious trouble. So how cool would that be for an MSP to be able to go to a customer 2 months in advance and saying, look, guys, if you don't watch this, that, and the other, you're going to be in serious trouble, and stop activity from happening before it actually happens. I mean, that's some pretty amazing stuff, right? To real-time analytics, right? So we already know from an analytics perspective that today we have actionable insights, right? So we have historical data, that's great for both in understanding employees and customer experience improvements. And the historical data allows us to sit down and analyze and make process improvements, right? Real-time data or live data is probably more geared towards more tactical use to avoid issues like, 5 callers are on a line, and is this going to impact our SLAs? The future really is going to be, again, understanding the buyer patterns, billing patterns, usage patterns, and providing valuable solutions to an outcome, potentially before that outcome even happens, right? So you can start to see where these things are happening, and we're going to continuously update, you as a partner as we continue to evolve this. But again, you got to get your partners and customers used to, the customers used to using some of these things. So you as a partner, the dashboards, and then customers using some of these meeting capabilities or their analytic capabilities today. So what about contact center? So from a contact center perspective, I wanted to dumb this down a little bit to kind of break this out into 2 basic areas, right? So from a contact center perspective, it's really about speech recognition. So what we mean by speech recognition is natural language processing, right? This is the ability to transcribe calls, voicemails, and call recordings, or the ability to take knowledge and understand what's being said through these various mediums and deliver those mediums in a way that's understandable. So that could be through text messages and making them more effectively. The second phase of it is, I don't just want to understand it. I want to make sure that I understand what they mean and apply what they mean through sentiment analysis, right? So that means saying, okay, based on the call that I heard, I would say that this is a positive conversation, or this was a negative conversation, or this was mixed, right? So the idea is to put that into an evaluation criteria as one. And then the second phase of that is to take that, and instead of doing this on overall conversations, can I do this on a conversation level and understand phrases within the conversation itself? So what does that mean? That means it's like, okay, I want as a quality manager to track, the last 3,000 calls that were done through the call center that said, cancel my service, right? I want to see the last 5,000 calls where somebody used the F word. Just an example, right? And be able to systematically build that from a reporting perspective, from a measurement perspective, and from a tracking perspective, and use it. So we're developing in all these areas. Some of this stuff you're going to start seeing in betas in Q4, but the real crux of it are going to come, in probably Q1, Q2 of 2021. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an understanding there. So look, I'm going to stress this again so that everybody understands, and this is my perception of the world. Not everybody will agree. AI is not about a revolution. AI is about evolution. So what does that mean at the end of the day? What I'm talking about here is that AI is expected to deliver great things, absolutely. But it is taking concepts and ideas that we are developing today from a communications perspective, items that are good, and making them great. It's not taking nothing and making it great. And the perception that a lot of people will have is AI will solve everything. No, it's not going to. That's not the objective. So the important thing to understand here is that evolution path. And again, I really do question a lot of these AI companies that are out there standalone, that are in the market, that don't really have any real applications, and trying to make people believe that suddenly AI will solve that problem. I don't think that's ever going to work. And as people understand the practical uses of AI, I think that strategy of just being an AI company will just start to fall through the cracks right now. It really is an embedded process into everything. So look, I think this is important for you to understand because it's the way I've interpreted the world, that AI is nothing without cloud. It's nothing, right? You can't apply AI to on-prem or other areas of solutions. You have to get people to the cloud. So from a communications perspective, in the next 2 years, it is a huge opportunity right now. It's $100 billion opportunity right now across various sets of businesses. So when I look at the foundation of communications, I'm talking about, do we really understand our customers well enough to be able to adopt cloud? Are they not only adopting cloud? And when I look at cloud right now, I'm not talking about just UCaaS or CCaaS. I'm talking about communications. At the end of the day, that's where things are starting to change. Customers don't necessarily care if it's UCaaS or CCaaS anymore. They care about the general experience from a communications perspective, right? And we know that this communications experience is not the offense of the team, it's the defense of the team. When it breaks down, people care, right? But look, how you change it back to an offense is understanding the various sets of buyer personas that are out there, and our ability as solution marketing people, which is through our partners, to be able to understand those buyer personas and apply the values and use of those to the customer. So how effectively do we understand business strategies for remote management and mobility, right? How effective do we understand, integration of business process flows with branded integrations that we have through Extend, or what we're coming out with in Q4, which will be a bunch of APIs that will be available? How well do we understand those customers, right? How well are these customers using basic analytics to track value? Are they tracking, employee or customer experiences, the customer journey that are available through Contact Center? Those are questions I'm asking, and this may exist for some of you, others it may not. But as you're making that momentum shift to cloud, these are questions that you got to answer, and we have to do better. So look, at the end of the day, this connected experience that I'm talking about right now, and remember we talked about it not being UCaaS and CCaaS. This is what I mean, right? There's fundamentally the items in blue go across the organization, whether it be administrative or knowledge workers or contact center workers or formal contact center workers, right? But essentially, each stage of these types of workers have different needs. Knowledge workers may just need collaboration tools like file sharing or any meeting, or the ability to use mobile, or the integration side of it, right? Informal contact center workers are maybe on the SMB side. You know how we have Contact Center Express, which is a lightweight contact center solution that embeds into Unite. Maybe they need some light reporting capabilities, right? Maybe they just need light administration tools. That could be another thing. Or formal contact center workers that really need the whole service of contact center plus everything that UCaaS builds in one systematic area that allows you to bring the customer experience and the employee experience together, right? So, it's a concept that we're seeing, but it's very important to understand. So, what does this mean from a intermediate perspective? Look, I'm going to leave you with this, and this is probably my final slide, is that, look, the value that we bring is that we've got both solutions. We've got the UCaaS side and we've got the contact center side. And so we're making strides to make building these personas based modeling a little bit easier every time. So on the UCaaS side with Unite, those of you who are aware of it, we have mix and match models now. So not one pricing or packaging program should meet everybody. I mean, there are different various sets of pricing and packaging offerings, and you can choose what you want, and you should be able to choose. Your customers should be able to choose what they want and figure out what those needs are in order to adapt to the right package. Contact center, right? Look, we want contact center to be built in conjunction with Unite. But I'll be honest with you, the contact center solution that we have today doesn't necessarily have to integrate with Unite. It can be built with any standalone PBX service that's out in the market today. I mean, I wanted to be built with Unite because that helps an overall business model and I think helps your customers and builds value. But look, there are going to be customers that already have another solution. So why should we restrict them from not being able to embed contact center services? Our goal at the end of the day with this connected experience, though, is to build this into one single application. So you've got one application for UCaaS and contact center and make it super, super simple for your customers to be able to onboard and embed new services. Now, where does the AI front come in on top of that? We talked about this. The evolution aspect of it will be, once this comes into a single app, AI and automation will be a part of it. It's just going to be a natural extension to what already exists today. But there's a lot of foundation and building that needs to happen before then. And so the message here is making sure that we're communicating this connected experience to customers in the most appropriate way to showcase transformation, right? For communications, at least. And that really covers, what I really wanted to talk about today. So I think I wanted to take some time and go through some Q&A if there are Q&A questions. So I'll pause for a second and see if we can have a look at some of the questions here, if there are any. So let me bring up a couple here. So is the AI engine Intermedia's own, or we're using someone else's? So this is it's a combination of things. So from a natural language processing perspective, we are sort of developing our own, but we're also leveraging for interpretation purposes other third-party systems to interpret that data for things like sentiment analysis and things of that nature, where we're using third parties as well. So it's a combination of both in order to get there. Now, from the back-end security perspective, a lot of that development activity internally is being done with our own sort of knowledge base and with some of our data scientists. And we're currently investing more and more into data scientists right now in order to continue that activity and work to optimize those various sets of experiences. So another question here: how does AI affect HIPAA compliance? Oh, wow, that's a good question. I think from an AI perspective, and this is, I think HIPAA has its own sets of standards that are in place. So, I mean, where I would see this happening from a HIPAA compliancy perspective and AI is more of the checks and balances of ensuring that standards that are being put in forth by HIPAA are a little bit more optimized. So let me give an example. Like you'll know that HIPAA is a very loose definition in a lot of ways. People define HIPAA in very different ways, which is why they have these BAAs or these business agreements that really look at these broad concepts and how we or organizations can fit into meeting that compliancy, right? So my view of it is that from an AI perspective, it'll be really that predictive modeling, right? And machine learning side of it that says, okay, we're looking at these various sets of compliancy standards and how they're being developed and implemented, and challenges that are being run from a HIPAA compliance perspective by various organizations. And how do I optimize that based on historical data? And then provide that predictive modeling aspect in order to improve those compliancy standards for various sets of users so that it becomes an easier transition, not just from the organization that's offering HIPAA compliance, but the effectiveness of the customer that's implementing it. That's how I see it, at least, right? But it's a very, very good question. I mean, that's a tough one. Thank you, Brad, for making it tough for me. So let's see, what else do we have here? Is there a roadmap to integrate some AI into regular Unite, such as where is this person calls fund and transfer? Yes, there is. So Mark, there will be some investments that are happening right now. So what I can tell you is there is a specific group that has been set up through our application service group that is specifically looking at some of the areas that we talked about from a UCaaS perspective and a contact center perspective. So a lot of those simple things that you, not simple, but a lot of those more those simpler tasks that you described would be included into those activities. A lot of it is being explored right now. So, but some of these basic things I can definitely see being part of sort of our UCAS initiative. But this will also be included with other stuff like the intuitive call recording or meeting call and meeting transcriptions or these personal voice assistants, right? And or the automation of user data, right? Moving between different applications. So there's a various sets of capabilities, but I can definitely see this being one of them that would be included. Can't say for sure, but again, because like I mentioned, this is not a one and done, we'll have more updates on this, and I probably in the middle to late of Q4 of how this will look from a UCAS perspective. So what else do we have here? Can you touch on how resellers should be positioning AI in their marketing? Brad, man, you're making it hard for me, man. Look, I think that there are various areas that I think we can talk about. And I think the important message here, and we talked about AI focusing on automation. I think that the key message, for partners, in my personal opinion, is to showcase, our abilities to not only bring full sets of communications, but how essentially we're making it easier for customers and partners to leverage aspects of automation. I wouldn't even call it AI, but automation through various activities, like we talked about, for improving contact center interactions, right? To make it easier for contact center companies or people that are leveraging contact center companies to have less people on the phone through automation, right? Or from a meetings experience, right? Having the ability to automate your meetings experience. So I don't want to spend the time basically transcribing meetings. I don't want to spend the time, typing out meeting recordings. So I can now make your meetings experience a little bit more efficient by having these automatic meeting notes be created for you so that you don't need to worry about it. So in my opinion, I think this is an opportunity to talk about AI, but from the context of automation and just making things simpler, right? So don't overcomplicate it with full detailed AI is the next big thing. Like, I don't think customers really care about it today. 3% adoption tells you they're concerned about it. But if you're talking about it in terms of actionable results of ROI and automation, I think that's really the spirit of it. And Brad, honestly, this is probably something that my team is going to be helping with as well. So we're going to start coming out with documentation. Hopefully, that will provide a better positioning for this. So as we get more and more better at improving our abilities of this, we'll hopefully have more documentation that you can leverage to help position. So hopefully you're not alone on it. All right. So this was one. Are we going to fix the any-meeting calendar invites? Existing invites will not. Okay. So Rob, this one I'm going to have to take offline. I am not 100% sure where this stands. I know that they're aware of the problem, but I want to be able to come back to you with sort of an idea and a firm date of when it's being fixed. I'll double check on this. So I need to revisit this one and get back to you on it. So I'll have somebody either reach out to you directly or I'll contact you directly with an update on that. Okay. I believe believe that is the last question that we had, unless there's any other questions. We'll give it another 10 seconds. If not, then I think we are going to be done. So look, I wanted to thank everybody for joining this session. This was, like I mentioned before, a very interesting, interesting presentation to put together. I hope this was something that was insightful for you guys. I hope that you got some value of it, and this was easy to understand. So, I'm welcoming any feedback that you guys have on this. As I mentioned before, this is not intended to be a one and done. So I want to be able to continue educating and updating you guys on this. But this is also an opportunity for you guys to express areas and needs and things, that you really want to see. Because we're going through this analysis right now in terms of our evolution process, what you guys are doing and the importance of what you guys need will play a role in a lot of our development activities from an AI perspective. So make sure that you're communicating with your channel manager. They have direct contacts to our channel marketing group, interfaces directly with us, or you can contact me directly, and I'm okay with that as well. And let us know, right, so that we can make things better for you, because we're really nothing without our partners, right? So that's basically it. So appreciate everybody joining today. Thanks again for the honor of being able to present to you. And we look forward to seeing you guys at the next webinar Wednesday.